Hey guys, I want to talk to you a little bit more about the mindset I've been working with and also about this kind of personal transformation I've been going through. First of all, some of you are probably wondering, why this transformation? Why do any of this at all? Why not just make music? And I wish it was that simple, and unfortunately life is not that simple. As many of you are probably aware of, as we become adults, and go through life, there are all of these goals that we, for whatever reason, can't seem to attain. How many people have started an exercise routine only to give up on it a few months later? How many people say they want to learn guitar and take lessons for a few months or a year or two and then just give up on it? In many ways, life is kind of defined by this contrast between the things that we want to do and the person that we want to be, and then the reality is oftentimes not that. Oftentimes the reality is that we are end up doing things that we don't want to do, and we end up becoming a person that we don't necessarily want to be, and because of that we end up in situations that we didn't intend to get into. And this is kind of the unfortunate state of the human experience. But I want to kind of talk about what motivated me to attempt this transformation to begin with, and the path I took to get to where I am now. And I'm hoping that by talking about this that if someone is watching this video and they're going through something similar, then maybe they can kind of use this as a blueprint or a roadmap to transform themselves and get out of that situation. So I know I've talked about aspects of this in some of my previous videos, and I'm going to do my best to make this a summarized version so that we're not here for days listening to me talk about this, because, I could probably fill volumes of books if I went into every little detail, but essentially it goes something like this. And again, I'm going to keep out some things out of respect for other people, and there's certain things that I just probably don't need to get into on YouTube. But for me, this all started off in my early adult years, and I had slowly worked myself into this perfect storm of a situation where I was essentially trapped by all of these interlocking problems. And, I couldn't solve this problem over here because of this other problem over here. And I couldn't solve that problem because there was some aspect of this problem. And it created this situation where I couldn't move forward, and I couldn't move backwards, and I couldn't go up, and I couldn't go down, and I couldn't go left, and I couldn't go right. I was literally just pinned by all of these opposing problems that had slowly sort of risen up, but they were all perfectly aligned in sort of trapping me with nowhere to go. I remember talking to a therapist a number of years ago when I was still living in Chicago. And, I was sort of, after a few sessions where I was trying to explain, what was wrong, it took me probably like a month or so just to explain to this guy, here's what's wrong, here's the stuff I'm dealing with. And I remember after one session, he kind of, he pulled me aside and he was like, most people come in here and they're dealing with the death of a family member, or they're dealing with one or two things. And he was like, I've never seen anyone with so many simultaneous problems going on. And he was actually in agreement with me. He was kind of perplexed. He's like, I don't see any way that you can get out of this, because you can't solve this without solving that, and you can't solve that without doing this, and you can't do this because of that. And he was, so, I essentially spent all of this money and time with this therapist, and at the end of the day, he was like, I can prescribe you some medication, and that's about it, because you're literally stuck, you're trapped. And the only solution that he could come up with is you're going to have to find a way to just walk away from all of it, because you can't solve any of it. And that was a really hard thing for me to accept. Basically that meant that I had to give up on all of these things that I was trying to do. And to be honest, I'm kind of a stubborn person. I don't give up easily, and I couldn't accept that, right away. It took me a number of years to actually accept that, yes, there was no solution, and all I could do was walk away from all of it, But he prescribed me some medication, and he said, maybe this will help. So I started, taking all these different medications. And I tried everything I could think of to try to break the deadlock that I was stuck in. I didn't just sit around and say, poor me. I tried everything. I even gave up music and tried a different career path, even though I hated it, and of course it didn't work. None of it worked. And in the process, I became addicted to this anxiety medication, and my health started fading away. And it reached a point where I had lost all of this weight and muscle mass, and I couldn't get enough of this medication. And my behavior with the doctors and the pharmacists sent up a bunch of red flags, and they basically cut me off. They said, we can't prescribe this to you anymore because you're not using it correctly. But it put me in this dangerous situation where I was addicted to this thing, and I could no longer afford the doctor's visits, and the pharmacists were, refusing to refill the medication. And I started exploring alternate paths to try and get this medication that were outside of the doctor and pharmacy. And it's easy to say, like, yeah, that's a dumb thing to do. But when you are in that situation and you don't have that medication and you're chemically dependent on it, it feels like a combination between your worst nightmare and the worst case of the flu that you've ever had combined, in addition to the anxiety and the stuff that you're already dealing with. So I was trying to plug that hole, and obtain this medication through alternate means. And eventually, the guy that I was getting it from, he overdosed and died, and I couldn't get it anymore. And I kind of, said to myself, if I can't find another way to deal with this, if I can't find another way out of this, I'm not going to last long, So I decided to quit cold turkey, and I went through this terrible withdrawal period that lasted, probably like 3 or 4 months of just feeling undescribably bad. It feels like someone is ripping your brain out of your skull while simultaneously messing with your thoughts and all of your emotions, while simultaneously being really sick, like you have the flu or something. And unfortunately, there are millions of people who take that medication. And what I'm talking about is like the benzodiazepine class of anti-anxiety medication, things like Xanax and Klonopin, and things like that. And it's like a literal miracle drug when you first start taking it, because it works. But it only works temporarily, and when it wears off, you're in a worse spot than you were before you took it. And it wasn't just the medication for me, it was the fact that I was in this situation where there was really no solution. I was in this unsolvable problem. So I quit the medication, I went through all those withdrawals, and I finally made the only move that I had, which was to leave everything and just completely start over somewhere else. But there's another thing with that medication, which most people don't know, is that it alters the chemistry of your brain. So it literally changes the way your brain is functioning. So even though I had quit the medication and I had, made it through the withdrawal period, and mind you, the withdrawal period was really bad for me because I was taking a lot of it every single day. I was on a really high dose. But anyways, if you stop taking it, that's great. But now you have to deal with the second thing, which is that your brain isn't working correctly, because it has literally been changed and altered by this medication you've been taking for however long you've been taking it. So your brain chemistry's off, right? Your thought patterns are off, and you no longer have any coping skills because you were taking this medication. Literally, your coping skill was the medication. So it was great that I was able to quit, but the challenge was really just getting started at that point, because I had to figure out how to fix and heal everything, but I also had to figure out, okay, how am I now going to operate in a way to overcome this anxiety, depression thing, the underlying causes which which led me into the medication in the first place. Those are still there. So I still have to deal with those on top of everything else. And I know that there are lots of people who are taking that medication who are in somewhat of a similar situation. So I had to find a way to make this change organically. I had to find a way to beat this thing without medication, without expensive therapists, without all that stuff. And my thought process was something like, this has to be possible. I don't really know how to do this, but there's got to be a way to do this. And my journey really started with the awareness that I'm the problem. Something about me is the problem here. I have to fundamentally change myself somehow. Admitting to yourself that you're the problem is a difficult thing to do. And that's the first hurdle you have to get over. It's not that so-and-so did this to me, or, society is making me this way or that way. No, it's fundamentally that there's something I'm doing that is making me this way. I wasn't born this way. I wasn't always like this way. So how did I get this way? If I have become this way with my own devices, then there's got to be some way that I can undo it. If I did it to myself, then there's got to be some way that I can undo it to myself. At least that was my thought process starting out. And I really started off with mindfulness. And some of you may be aware of what mindfulness is, or maybe you just heard some people talking about it, or maybe you just think it's like a buzzword. But essentially it's developing this skill. It's like a skill set of being intensely aware of the present moment that you're in, and becoming more aware of, how do I actually feel in this present moment? How does my body feel? What are my thoughts doing? So mindfulness is really like a technique and a practice to become more self-aware. It's not like something that you just go and do 1 or 2 times and all of a sudden you're mindful. In some aspects, it's like a way to live your life. And in other aspects, it's a way to balance your thoughts. And then another aspect of it might be that, if you can change your thought patterns on the inside, that's going to change your body on the outside, which is ultimately going to change your perception of reality, which is ultimately going to change your reality, right? It's that whole kind of idea that if my thoughts are controlling my mood and my emotions and my behavior, and my emotions and behavior are controlling what my body is doing, by cultivating a greater awareness of my thoughts, and by developing the skills to choose what and how I want to think about things, then I can influence what my emotions are going to be, and then I can ultimately influence everything else. And that sounds like an easy thing, right? It's just like, well, if you're sad, think a happy thought. But that's a vast misunderstanding of what mindfulness is. It's extremely hard to change your thought patterns, because these thought patterns have been, they've been with you for a long time. And through repetition, you've reinforced them over and over and over again, so it is really hard to break a thought pattern that is reinforced like that. But it's not impossible, right? So I think mindfulness is the first step for anyone who's trying to make any sort of transformation. And it's a really good step too. I read a number of books and also took a number of courses, and even worked with a therapist at one time exclusively on mindfulness. And if you're looking for a good place to start, then I would recommend checking out an American professor and teacher named Jon Kabat-Zinn. That's Jonkabat and then -Zinn. He's been a mindfulness instructor for several decades now. He had a training course on masterclass.com that I went through, and I found it to be quite helpful. Another good resource that you might want to check out is a guy by the name of Sadhguru. He has a lot of videos on YouTube. He also has some classes and some trainings. I did his course called Inner Engineering, and he incorporates mindfulness with a lot of teachings and wisdom from the yogic traditions of India. So I found both of those individuals to be very helpful, insightful, and great guides to at least point me in the right direction. So if you're completely lost like I was, those two guys are a really good starting point. And just as a side note, the path is going to be different for everyone. You know, the path I'm taking might not necessarily be your path. You know, no two paths are the same. No two people are the same. But I think the destination is very similar for a lot of people, right? We all want to be healthy. We all want to live happy, joyful lives. We all want to be full of love. We all want our life to have some kind of purpose. We're all searching for truth, and we're all trying to transcend, all of this nonsense that's around us constantly. So I believe that even though everyone's different and there are different approaches, that fundamentally we're all trying to get to a somewhat similar place, Now here's where it gets a little bit interesting for me.
Oh, how do I get back to the place where I once was? My friend, will I ever see you again? Crooked schemes and lonely broken dreams keep spinning like a record on repeat. I hope and pray that our paths will meet someday. My friend, will I ever see you again? I hope and pray, I think about it every day. My friend, won't you come and see me again? It blows my mind when the world is so unkind to find such a shining heart of gold. A second chance is the best that we have left in this life. Let's make it count this time. Ain't it strange when you're living out of range and find the embers left inside? And it's okay if you're feeling down today. And yes, I'm a little bit broken too. I hope and pray that our paths will meet someday. My friend, won't you come and see me again? I hope and pray, I think about it every day. And I know that I'm gonna see you again. There's a girl inside my head. We met back when I was dead. Inside, she still lingers on my mind. One more song to keep the fire burning strong. And I know we can make it through the night.